the first thing we're going to do is we are going to make texture boards, and these actually take a while to dry, so they are a good place to start. I'm not sure we will be able to actually use these in this lesson, but they are super fun to make. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my video over here and put my thing down. And what we're going to do is we are just going to use Elmer's glue, and I'm going to just draw a design with Elmer's glue. Maybe I want to make a brick wall. So what would we use these for? Well, when the Elmer's glue dries, it will dry raised. And then I can put a piece of paper over it and take a crayon and then rub the side of the crayon over the paper and do a textured rubbing. So I like to do these when I want to add texture, and I also like to use the crayons and paint over the top of the crayons with watercolor because it leaves a nice effect, because the wax in the crayon resists the watercolor. So I'm just making a little brick wall here, and then I'm going to lay this aside and wait for it to dry. It could take up to 24 hours to dry. So like I said, we might not be able to use this today, but this is just another technique that you can use in your art making, which you can actually buy texture plates online, but this is obviously a much less expensive way to go. Okay, so that's one thing. So that was with Elmer's glue, and this is just a piece of cardstock. You need a little bit heavier paper like cardstock, or you could even cut like a part of a cereal box and use a cereal. You guys are probably way too young to even know or have ever seen these, but that's how we used to have to put our paper in the printers is with these dotted edges. Now we don't use that, but they can also make a great little art tool too. I'll show you in just a minute. Okay, so on our paper, I'm going to take a roller, but if you have a piece of cardstock or a card, what we're going to do, we're just going to take our acrylic paint and we're going to drag it across our paper and roll it across our paper. So if you have acrylic paint, now I like to use super cheap acrylic paint. You can buy these even at Walmart or any craft store, but I like to use these for this kind of paper because it's really thin and it doesn't have a lot of pigment. So when we make our books, it won't make the paper really thick. So we can water it down too. You can mix water and acrylic paint and thin it out too. So I'm just dragging this across the paper, and it's still thick enough to leave really nice marks too. I forgot to grab paper towels, which is one more thing that's pretty essential. So oh, here we go. Okay. So if I want to mix some other colors into that, I can go ahead and do that with my card. And really, don't worry about it. Just make a mess. It's not, it's copy paper. It's not expensive. And if you don't like what you've done, you can just use it in the fireplace or in the recycling bin. So we don't have to make perfect things here. All right, so I'm gonna set that piece of paper aside. We're gonna come back to it. A lot of times I have a scrap bin of paper that we maybe like had homework assignments done on, and we'll just turn those papers to the back side and use them, or even use them on the homework side, because it's kind of fun to have the print when we're done with it. So you don't have to feel like you're wasting paper. Okay, this time I'm gonna use my roller here. And like I said, you can use like, you could use an old rolling pin, you could use a Play-Doh rolling pin. Anything that rolls is great. And I'm going in lots of different directions here. And just rolling this on my paper. Maybe I'll add some green just for fun to see what happens. Or not, because that's a little clogged here. All right. This is just a paint roller from wall painting. I bet your parents have something like that around the house too. Okay, so we're gonna lay that aside. Actually, so let's make a couple of these papers because we're gonna come back to them. We just want to get paint. And you know, this layer, it really doesn't matter because a lot of times we will probably just keep adding layers and layers and layers to it and you won't even see it. We are going to make some stencils. So if you are not old enough to use an exacto knife, and you can either get a parent's help or you can do these stencils in a couple different ways. So one of those ways is to use scissors, and we're gonna draw our shapes on our cardstock paper. You can use cardstock paper, you can use manila, envelopes, whatever you have. And you can cut out these and we can use them as stencils. So I drew a funny little cloud here. So I can either use the positive space or the negative space. I can tape this back together and use it as a stencil, or I can use this as a stencil, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Or if you have hole punches, or little decorative punches, you can punch holes in a strip of paper and make a stencil that way. Or my favorite way to make stencils, but it takes an exacto knife, is to take a clear piece of paper. So it can be either, you can take this, what this is just a clear sheet protector, but you could also, if you have a laminator at home, you could laminate a piece of your lamination paper and make that into a stencil. So all I'm doing is cutting this apart here so that I can open it up. I'm just cutting the edges off here. You could use that and that would make a really nice stencil. Or if you go to an office supply store, you can buy a giant pack of clear projector sheets when they used to use projectors and they'd print those out. So there's a lot of options. Most people probably have these clear sheet protectors. So that is what we're going to use today. So what we're going to do is we're going to, so you make a stencil in any way that you have the ability of making that. And I love things to be kind of wonky and not perfect. That's I feel like kids are the best artists. They make the best art because they just make it. They express themselves and they don't over analyze it or try to make it too perfect. Okay, so I'm just gonna tape those lines that I cut here. I'm gonna put a piece of tape on both sides just so that when we use our stencil, it'll be less likely to leak through there. You might have to trim the tape a little bit if it's too thick here. Okay, so the other way to make a stencil so I'm gonna have to go in and trim a little bit of that tape and fold it back. Kind of reminds me of sewing. Okay, and that one here. All right, so there is a very crazy raindrop stencil. Take your clear paper and a Sharpie marker and draw in your design. Now you're just going to cut away. So make sure that you use a cutting mat so you're not cutting on a surface that's not supposed to be cut. And your exacto knife. Now make sure that you get a parent's help and make sure your parents know that you're using an exacto knife because they can definitely cut you. So we don't want any injuries here. My exacto knife is a little bit funny, so. And I'm just going to cut out where the black is not. So I leave the black lines and I cut out the space in between. This is the weirdest exacto knife. To be honest with you, I am at my parents' house today. We took a little road trip, and so I don't have all of the supplies that I'm used to, so we just had to gather up what they had. And so, a little bit different. There is my super crazy stencil. And I am going to cut it out here because I'm going to use this clear paper for a couple other things. For at least one other thing. So, okay. So we are going to come back to that. So there's one stencil there. Now we're going to make a stamp. We're going to use this clear paper. And the reason that we're going to use this clear paper is because when we actually use our stamp, it will be really nice to be able to position it and see where we're actually putting it on our paper. So we're using the same paper as we did our stencil on, our clear paper. Okay, so now we're gonna draw our design. So you could draw a sun or a rainbow or a cloud. If you didn't notice, I'm using all weather themed. And I think that weather themed is really fun because it can be really symbolic. Like a rainbow can be a symbol of hope after a storm, or rain can be maybe you're having a bad day and you want to express that, or maybe you love rain and it's fresh and clean, or a sun is light and life. So all right, so now I'm going to take my hot glue gun and I am going to trace these lines. Make sure that you have an adult's help with this. And then I'm going to take my silicone mat while my hot glue is still hot, and I'm just going to press it down. So it'll have its own character too when you smooth it out. But the reason that we put the silicone mat and we smooth it out like that is so that when you put the stamp on, or the ink on the stamp, it will it'll actually show up. It'll have a better surface, a smoother surface. If you don't do that, then you just have a really uneven stamp where some things don't print. All right, these are going to be the funniest looking rainbows ever. Kylie, I really like the pictures in your bedroom on your wall. Those are really cool. Did you paint those, or did you get them from somewhere?
They're paint by numbers.
Oh, that's awesome. Beautiful colors. Okay, so crazy looking rainbow. We're gonna try and print it and see what happens because I am not sure on that. So my paper, the beautiful thing about working with acrylic is that it dries super fast. So I can already bring back my paper and use it. This is a little bit of a dry ink pad. All right, so now I'm going to take my stamp and hope that it actually shows up, because that ink pad was not the greatest. So see how I can see right through it, and I can put it exactly where I want it to go. All right, not bad, not bad. It showed up. I might use acrylic paint instead and try and get a better print here. That's a crazy rainbow. It has crazy lines. I'm gonna have to practice with this hot glue gun next time. So I'm just gonna come back here and paint. This is acrylic paint. And paint another rainbow. So one thing that I actually really love about working with copy paper and just plain doing this is, one is it's a really inexpensive way to practice making marks, and you don't have to worry about ruining it, and you can start to think about making good compositions on your practice paper. I have some other medium here too. So little, on this one, I'm actually going to put my ink not right on the stamp, because when you're doing stencils, you don't want a lot of ink. So you kind of want to blot that out. Oh, that was really light. It's really light color. Let's try that. So we're just layering and layering and layering. Lots of layers. So there you go. That turned out pretty awesome, in my opinion. Here's my little stencil. It was nice to have an X-Acto knife that kind of had a mind of its own. I really like how that stencil turned out. All right, so I'm looking and I'm thinking, what else can I add to this? I can take and add chalk marks to it. The only problem with chalk is if you don't seal it, it will wipe off. So chalk and pastel are better behind glass, or they make excellent guidelines if I draw a design and then I want to paint in between the chalk lines. That's great. So chalk, charcoal, and pastel, they're super fun to use, but they do wipe off. So you have to be careful of that. Okay, another fun thing is, so I have these raindrops. I have my raindrop stencil, but I also have my raindrop, and these are we're going to use as masking tools. So I'm going to actually just stick them on there wherever I want them to be. And I'm going to take my roller and hope that this shows up. My paint's a little light. I should have maybe chosen a little bit darker paint here. Okay, so I'm gonna take my roller, I'm gonna roll in my paint, and then I'm gonna roll over the top of these. Paper. And when I pick them up, see what? So they left a little mark. Now, the more contrasting you use in paint color, the better those will show up. And you can keep reusing those. So we're just gonna keep on adding and adding and adding layers until we get it exactly where we want it to be. So we've done rolling, scraping, stencils, stamps, scribble marks. We've done masking, and we've made a texture plate, but our texture plate is still drying. Well, mine is still drying. So as you keep on going, and I'm gonna keep going after this video ends. It's going to end in a couple minutes. So keep on playing with this and keep on making marks, and the more layer you add and the more time that you spend, the more the story develops here that we're creating, and the more interest that we create. So then when we use this paper to make our books, then it will be very tactile and very beautiful, and keep on working on this. So that, and then lay your papers to dry when you get them where you want it to be. And tomorrow at the same time, we're going to come back and we are going to use these papers to make a book, or maybe a couple books. It depends on how much time we have.